That's where I'm going to feel. Let's just slow down for a second. I know you're busy. You've got things pulling at your attention, notifications, obligations, distractions everywhere. That's where I want to ask you something real simply. When was the last time you gave yourself one solid hour, undivided, uninterrupted for you? Not for the world, not for work, not even for your family. I'm talking about you, because here's the truth. 1 hour can change everything. 1 hour of focused effort, 1 hour of honest reflection. That's where we're going to feel 1 hour of brutal clarity. That's all it takes to flip the switch. So don't worry about yesterday. Don't stress over tomorrow. Just lock in. Give me this hour. You won't leave the same. Clarity is born in stillness, not kosa. In a world that constantly demands your attention, it's easy to confuse movement with progress. We rush from one task to another, fill our schedules, and pride ourselves on being busy. But in that noise and that relentless forward motion, something crucial gets lost. Clarity? That's where I'm going to feel the kind of clarity that gives your life direction, the kind of clarity that reminds you who you are, what you value, and where you're truly heading. One I'm going to feel. And that kind of clarity doesn't come when you're multitasking or scrolling or trying to be everywhere at once. It comes when you stop. When you pause, gonna feel. When you strip away the noise and let yourself sit in the quiet discomfort of stillness. Stillness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the internal work that we often avoid. That's where I'm gonna feel. It's sitting with your thoughts long enough to hear the truth underneath them. It's paying attention to what your gut has been whispering while your head's been shouting. That's where I'm going to feel. It's about slowing down, not as a sign of weakness, but as a strategy, as a recalibration. When you allow yourself to be still, you give yourself the room to reflect, to question. That's where I'm going to feel, to notice. And in that noticing, you begin to see things as they really are, not as you wish they were or pretend they might be. That's where clarity lies. Clarity is not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, and most people are too busy to even ask them. That's where I'm going to feel. They're so caught up in the urgency of now that they never stop to ask if what they're doing even matters. But when you get still, the questions start to surfacing. Am I proud of how I'm living? Do my actions match my values? What have I been avoiding? What am I pretending not to know? These aren't easy questions. They sting, but they strip away the fog. They break down the illusions. They point you back to yourself. Our culture worships speed, but speed without direction is just motion wasted. That's where I'm going to feel. Clarity is the compass. And you don't find a compass in the storm. You find it when the winds settle, when you can see the stars again. That's the gift of stillness. I'm going to feel. It doesn't give you something new. It reveals what's already there. It reconnects you with your inner knowing, the part of you that's been drowned out by deadlines, expectations. That's where I'm going to feel. And the pressure to keep performing. When you slow down, you see what you've been running from. And sometimes I'm going to feel what you've been running from is the very thing that needs your attention the most. I'm going to feel 1 hour of stillness can be more productive than an entire day of hustle if it leads you back to what matters. That's where I'm going to feel. It's not about meditating in a cave or turning off your phone for a week. That's where I'm going to feel. It's about carving out intentional space, even if it's just 60 minutes, to shut out the world and tune back in. Because clarity doesn't chase you, it waits for you. And it rewards those who choose to meet it on purpose. 1 focused hour beats 10 distracted ones. In today's productivity-obsessed culture, we've been taught to believe that doing more is always better. That's stacking tasks, juggling responsibilities, and staying busy all day somehow equals progress. But real progress doesn't come from how much you do. It comes from how deeply you focus. That's where I'm going to feel you can spend 10 hours working in a scattered, half-present state and achieve less than what 1 single hour of true focus could bring you. Because focus is leverage. You're going to feel. When your attention is undivided, your out becomes exponential. Most people live in a constant state of mental fragmentation. Their thoughts jump from one thing to another, pulled by texts, tabs, conversations, and background noise. Even when they sit down to do something important, their minds are still entangled in 100 loose threads. That's where I'm going to feel. And then they wonder why their results feel mediocre, why nothing feels finished, why everything feels heavier than it should. It's not a time problem. It's a focus problem. Why I'm going to feel. You can't move forward when your mind is stuck in 10 directions at once. Focus demands intention. It means saying no to everything that isn't aligned with the task at hand. I'm going to feel. It means turning off distractions, shutting the door, silencing the noise, and committing fully, not halfway, to what you're doing. That level of presence is rare today. That's where but it's also where the breakthroughs lie. 1 hour of deep, uninterrupted focus can move the needle more than a full day of multitasking. That's where I'm going to feel, because it's not just about time. It's about attention. And where your attention goes, your energy flows. When you give something your full attention, you start to notice the layers that are usually hidden. Your thinking ideas become clearer. Your execution becomes faster. You start to operate in flow, not from force, but from clarity. That flow state doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you remove friction. Friction is every notification, every mental tab you've opened, every unfinished task trying to live rent-free in your head. The more friction you eliminate, the deeper your focus becomes. And once you're in it, you realize how powerful you actually are when your mind isn't scattered. I'm going to feel. The people who get extraordinary results aren't working harder than everyone else. They're working with greater focus. They understand time as a tool, but focus is the blade. That's where I'm going to feel. You can swing time all day, but without focus, you're just dulling the edge. When you bring laser focus into even a single hour of your day, you change the weight of your work. I'm going to feel. You move with purpose. You eliminate noise. You create from a place of alignment instead of exhaustion. I'm going to feel. That one focused hour becomes a catalyst, something that makes the rest of your day more efficient, more meaningful, and more directed. Focus is a decision. It's a boundary you set with the world and with yourself. It requires discipline, not just to start, but to stay. To stay locked in when your mind wants to drift. I'm going to feel. To stay present when distractions call your name. To stay committed to the one thing that actually matters right now. That self-honesty is the first step to transformation. Before any real change can happen, you have to be willing to tell yourself the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because the lies we tell ourselves are often the ones that keep us stuck the longest. We say we're fine when we're not. That's where I'm going to feel. We say we're trying our best when deep down, no, we've been coasting. We point to circumstances, people, or timing as the reason we're not where we want to be. Feel when the real reason might be sitting in the mirror, and facing that truth requires courage most people don't want to find. That's where I'm going to feel. You can't build a new version of yourself on top of denial. If you want growth, you need a foundation of honesty. That means looking at your patterns without excuses. It means asking where I'm going to feel. What am I pretending not to see? And sitting with whatever answer comes up. It means acknowledging the habits that are sabotaging you. I'm going to feel. The relationships you're holding on to out of fear, the goals you keep postponing because they expose your insecurity. Honesty isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. That's where I'm going to feel. You can't fix what you won't face, and you can't heal what you refuse to admit is broken. Most people are more comfortable staying confused than being honest. I'm going to feel, because confusion gives you an out. If you tell yourself you don't know what to do, then you don't have to take responsibility. But deep down, you usually, know. You just don't like the answer. You know the relationship is toxic. You know the job is draining your soul. You know you've been avoiding the gym, the difficult conversation. I'm going to feel the personal discipline. But as long as you stay in the fog, you don't have to act. Self-honesty clears the fog. It brings things into focus. Not to shame you, but to free you. It's where I'm going to feel there is a brutal kindness in being real with yourself. Stop wasting energy defending a version of your life that no longer fits. You stop pretending to be okay with mediocrity. You stop tolerating patterns that are beneath who you could be. And once you do that, you make space for growth, for change, for peace. You begin to build a life that's actually yours, not one that's been scripted by fear, expectations, or old stories. But you can't skip this step. You can't outsource it. I'm going to feel. Self-honesty is an internal confrontation, one that demands honest reflection and an unflinching willingness to see things as they are. That's where I'm going to feel. It's not about being hard on yourself. It's about being real with yourself. Real enough to say, I've been settling. Real enough to say, I'm going to feel, I've been avoiding. Real enough to say, this isn't working. That's where transformation begins. Not in motivation, not in planning. In truth, that's where I'm going to feel. Truth cuts through the noise. It shatters illusions. It brings pain, but also clarity. And once you're clear, you become dangerous to anything that was holding you back. Feel what you tolerate today, you become tomorrow. Every day in small moments, you're either reinforcing your standards or eroding them. The behaviors you let slide, I'm going to feel. The boundaries you ignore, the excuses you accept. Those aren't just temporary lapses. They're laying the foundation for who you're becoming. That's where I'm going to feel. People think transformation is about the big decisions, the bold moves, the dramatic shifts. But in reality, it's shaped in the quiet moments of tolerance. That's where I'm going to feel. The little things you let go unchecked. The standards you lower, just keep the peace or avoid discomfort. Those choices stack, and over time, they start to shape your identity. I'm going to feel. You don't become mediocre overnight. It happens gradually in layers. It happens when you skip the gym once and then again. I'm going to feel when you avoid the difficult conversation because it's easier to stay silent. When you let people disrespect your time or energy and tell yourself it's not a big deal. That's where I'm going to feel. But it is a big deal, because every time you tolerate something that goes against your values, you send a signal to yourself that those values don't really matter. I'm going to feel. And if you do that often enough, you begin to live in a version of life that you never consciously chose. It was just built on accumulated compromises. Tolerance can be dangerous when it becomes a habit. Not the kind of tolerance rooted in patience or kindness, but the kind that stems from fear, laziness, or low self-worth. That's where I'm going to feel. It's easy to convince yourself that you're being understanding or flexible, when in truth, you're just avoiding accountability. You're allowing things to continue because confronting them would require change, and change is uncomfortable. But the longer you let something slide, the deeper its roots grow. They'll feel what was once a moment becomes a pattern. What was once a compromise becomes your normal. Every standard you lower becomes a message to your future self. If you tolerate negativity, that's where I'm going to tell you. You become someone who attracts and accepts it. If you tolerate procrastination, you become someone who struggles to execute. If you tolerate toxic relationships, I'm going to feel you become someone who forgets their own value. And the scariest part is you don't even realize it's happening until the cost becomes too high to ignore. Until your health, peace, or going to feel, or purpose begins to suffer under the weight of all the things you thought were harmless to let slide. Raising your standards isn't about being perfect. That's where I'm going to feel. It's about being intentional. It's about deciding what you will and will not accept, not from others, but from yourself. Because once you draw that line, once you say, I don't tolerate that anymore, you force change. You start showing up differently. People respond to your energy differently. Opportunities shift. But it all begins with what you allow today. Every moment you choose to raise the bar, even a little, you inch closer to the version of yourself you were meant to become. I'm going to feel. And every moment you lower it even slightly, you drift further away from that potential. Discipline in 1 hour builds momentum for life. Most people think discipline is a trait you're born with or some rigid structure that kills creativity. But the truth is, discipline is a form of self-respect. It's the decision to keep a promise to yourself when no one else is watching. That's where I'm going to feel. And when you choose to lock in just for 1 hour with full discipline, something inside you changes. You're not just doing a task. You're telling yourself, I show up, I finish, I follow through. That mindset compounds. It spills into other areas of your life in ways you don't even see at first. People often wait for motivation to hit before they take action, but that's backwards. Discipline creates the motivation. The first few minutes of that disciplined hour might feel heavy, uncomfortable, or even pointless. But once you push through the resistance, you tap into a deeper current. That's where I'm going to feel. You stop negotiating with your emotions and start following your decisions. And in that shift, you find momentum. The kind of momentum that doesn't disappear the next day. The kind that builds character, confidence, and control. That 1 hour becomes proof you did what you said you would do. That proof is powerful. It changes how you see yourself. I'm going to feel. Momentum is born in the small wins, not the big gestures. When you commit to just 1 hour of focused, disciplined effort, you break the inertia. You interrupt the cycle of excuses. That's where I'm going to feel. Of distractions, of hesitation. And that break is everything, because once you've moved even slightly, it's easier to keep moving. It's easier to do the next thing. I'm going to feel you don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You need to create one momentum and build from there. That moment often starts with a single disciplined hour. That's where I'm going to feel. Discipline isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. It's about showing up whether you feel like it or not. Some days that hour will be filled with breakthroughs and clarity. Other days it'll feel like a grind. But either way, you're building muscle, mental muscle, emotional muscle, spiritual muscle. And that kind of strength doesn't just help you during that 1 hour. It shapes how you respond to everything else life throws at you. You become less reactive, more grounded. You stop being controlled by your moods and start living by your values. That's where I'm going to feel. The reason one disciplined hour matters so much, because it teaches you that you're in control, that no matter how chaotic life feels, you can still carve out a space where you're in charge. That control breeds confidence, and confidence rooted in discipline becomes a quiet, unshakable force. You walk differently. That's where I'm going to feel. You speak with more conviction. You trust yourself more deeply. And that trust opens doors. It gives you access to parts of yourself you didn't know existed, not because the hour was easy, but because you chose to master it. The world will always try to pull you in 1,000 directions. It will give you every excuse to delay, to coast, to settle. But discipline is your resistance to that pull. It's your declaration that you are not at the mercy of your impulses, that you can choose structure over chaos. I'm going to feel progress over comfort, growth over convenience. And once you choose it once, just for 1 hour, you prove you can choose it again. I'm going to feel. You don't need more time. You need more intention. People walk through life thinking their biggest problem is the lack of hours in a day, but time has never been the issue. I'm going to feel. Everyone gets 24 hours, and some people build empires with it, while others waste it waiting for the perfect moment. It's not about how much time you have. That's where I'm going to feel. It's about what you do with the time you've already been given. Intention is what separates motion from progress. I'm going to feel you can be busy all day and still go nowhere if you're not intentional about where you're headed and why. We often fall into the trap of reacting instead of deciding. I'm going to feel We check our phones before our minds are even fully awake. We answer messages that aren't urgent. We say yes to things that don't matter. That's where I'm going to feel. We spend our time putting out fires that we started by not being intentional in the first place. Then at the end of the day, we wonder where all the time went. That's where I'm going to feel. It wasn't stolen. It was spent without direction. Intention is the act of deciding ahead of time what deserves your energy. Going to feel. It's not about being rigid. It's about being conscious. When you move with intention, even 1 hour can carry the weight of a full day. You're not just going through the motions. That's where I'm going to feel. You're not just checking off boxes. You're aligned. You know why you're doing what you're doing. That why adds gravity to your actions. You become more present, more focused, more effective. You start to feel less exhausted because your energy is flowing where it matters, not being scattered across meaningless obligations and distractions. I'm going to feel. The difference is night and day, and it starts with the decision to be deliberate. Being intentional also means facing what you've been avoiding. That's where I'm going to feel. It means being honest about where your time is going and asking if it reflects the life you say you want. If you want health, but your time goes to fast food and comfort, that's where I'm going to feel. There's a disconnect. If you want financial freedom, but your hours are spent scrolling and shopping, something's off. Intention bridges that gap. That's where I'm going to feel. It turns vague hopes into concrete habits. It turns scattered effort into focused movement. And that movement compounds. Intention doesn't require a massive shift in your schedule. That's where I'm going to feel. It starts with asking one simple question before every choicing. Does this move me forward or pull me away? That question alone can change everything. That's where I'm going to feel, because when you live on autopilot, you give away your power. But when you pause, reflect, and choose with clarity, you take it back. That's where I'm going to feel. You stop letting time just happen to you and start using it like the gift it is. That shift can happen in a single hour. 1 hour of fully intentional action can create a ripple effect that carries through your entire day, week, and beyond. That's where I'm going to feel. Living with intention means becoming the architect of your time instead of its victim. It means cutting out the noise, ignoring the pressure to do everything. That's where I'm going to feel, and doing the right things with presence and purpose. That kind of living doesn't require more hours. It requires more awareness, more alignment, more truth.